What is going on, YouTube world? Austin Zaback here with another YouTube video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the new proposed stimulus package. Not only will you get the $1,200, but you'll also get $2,000 every single month for the next 12 months. And of course, that is assuming that your income is under $130,000. The number of unemployments is hitting record highs. 22 million Americans have filed for unemployment just last month alone. In addition to all the jobs that have been lost, the SBA has reported that their $350 billion fund is out of money. And it obviously makes it apparent that the initial amount of money was never going to be enough for American small businesses. The good news obviously is that there's been a ton of talk that $250 billion could be getting added to the fund. But the real reason that we're here today is going to be talking to you about all of this money that is being proposed to going to every American over the next however long. First of all, the amount of money that we're talking about here is a legit ton of money, okay? What are the odds? I mean, what are the chances that this actually comes into fruition? So today I'm going to talk about the proposed stimulus that is being talked about for individuals and what the odds are that the $1,200 turns into a $2,000 a month, 12-month fund. I personally believe that this is a topic that every single person should be educated on to the maximum capacity. I mean, essentially, if this were to ever happen, this obviously affects a ton of people. So I'm going to be kind of unraveling as many possible details as I absolutely can in today's video, so I hope you enjoy. If you haven't already, smash that like button, smash that subscribe button, and stay tuned to the end of the video. I'll begin by explaining the proposal that is currently on the table, and the proposal is called the Emergency Money for the People Act. And what criteria obviously you must meet in order to qualify for this proposed bill. To start, if you're over the age of 16 and you make less than $130,000 a year, you would meet the criteria for the bill that is, again, being proposed. Now, if you're married, that number would double up to $4,000, assuming that you make less than $260,000 per year as a couple. And also, if you fall into this category, you'll receive up to $500 per child that you have per month. On the flip side of this, for every $1,000 that you earn that is above the numbers that I just previously talked about, that number would actually get decreased by $50 per month. So if you were $1,000 over $130,000, your income would actually go from $2,000 a month to $1,950 a month, and so on and so forth. And that obviously gets capped out at $170,000 for an individual and $340,000 as a couple. So if you've made $170,000 in a calendar year in 2018 or 2019, or $340,000 as a couple in that calendar year, then you would basically not get a stimulus at all. And in addition to everything that we're talking about right now, these payments would essentially be tax-free, meaning that you're not gonna have to pay any money to Uncle Sam whatsoever. And even if you had no prior income or no prior employment, you would actually meet the criteria to qualify, and this essentially also includes students and dependents as well, and even adult dependent individuals. According to the current proposal, the payments would actually go for 6 months, and then they would do a vote, and that vote would basically decide whether or not it would go for another 6 months after that, or it would only be 6 months in full. Now, I know you're watching this and you're like,
Austin, this sounds all fine and dandy. As a matter of fact, it sounds amazing because I get to sit at home for $420. As a matter of fact, I get to sit at home the entire month of April, and I get paid to essentially go get food and weed and come home and do that.
But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's talk about the process this proposal must face, because at the end of the day, it is just a proposal as of right now. The very first thing that will happen is the bill will face a vote by the House of Representatives. Politicians will then negotiate, and they'll essentially amend the original proposal before it faces a majority vote, after which it is approved, shall be passed along to the Senate. Then essentially the same thing happens in the Senate, except for it really gets raised to the maximum extremes, and everybody looks at this thing from pretty much every angle. And then there's obviously a bunch of debates, and there's a bunch of changes, and I mean, you pretty much know how it goes probably with politics and with things like this in general. The Senate will then pretty much create a brand new draft of the previous amending draft that essentially will have all of the gray areas removed to the best of their ability. And then after this, Senate will vote on the new draft. And if the majority of the Senate agrees, then this bill gets essentially passed along to the President of the United States. And from there, the President essentially has two options. They get to veto the bill, and they get to explain why they have pretty much negated the bill, or they get to essentially sign on the dotted line and say, hey, we're moving forward. Should the President veto the bill, it then goes back to Senate, and then the Senate essentially has the opportunity to override that decision if 2/3 of the Senate essentially decides to override it. To put it plainly, the chances of this bill in its current form getting passed and actually happening is essentially slim to none, and I wouldn't recommend you relying or expecting this bill to pass, again, in its current form at least. But really quick, before you click off of the video, I want to talk to you about some of the realities of if this bill were to actually get passed and what you can actually expect, and kind of give you my thoughts as to do I think or do I not think a bill like this could ever get passed. What you've got to remember is that a stimulus bill like this would be incredibly expensive for America. I mean, essentially, it would be outrageously expensive. Over 90% of Americans would actually qualify for the present bill being proposed. I mean, it would just be out of this world. After breaking down all the numbers and kind of looking at this, approximately 225 million Americans would actually qualify for the $2,000 a month for 12 months, again, in its current setting. And this absurd figure comes out to the tune of about $488 billion a month, which over the course of 6 months would equal about $2.6 trillion. Now, this needs to be spoken about because it really does make you wonder where the money would come from. And I mean, again, this number is just, it is a really, really big number. Like, where does all this money going to even come from? So that is why a minute ago when I said it is really unlikely for a bill like this to get passed. I mean, when you look at these numbers, it kind of makes sense why it is so unlikely because of the hefty bill that comes along with the numbers that we're talking about. I mean, it's a pretty outrageous number, I'm not gonna lie. The reason that this bill essentially is even getting so much traction and even getting looked at the rate that it is getting looked at and the hype that people are hyping this whole thing up to be is essentially because the current $1,200 bill basically gives an American about a month, okay? And a child about a month. I mean, there's not really a whole lot that most people can do on the $1,200 current stimulus package. While the $1,200 is very good and it is essentially a Band-Aid, I mean, it is just that. It is essentially a Band-Aid and it isn't gonna last your average person. And I mean, you know, out of all people, if you're watching this video, when it tends to rain, it tends to pour. So that is pretty much why everybody on the internet and all of the social media platforms, they're talking about this potential new $2,000 a month proposed stimulus bill. One of the bigger questions that I have is what are other countries doing in times like this? I mean, let's just think about it for a minute. Let's maybe look at what some other countries are actually doing. When we look at our Canadian neighbors up to the north, what we end up finding is that their bill is essentially $500 a week for up to 16 weeks. And that is called the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. And that money will essentially be going to anybody that has lost their job due to the illness or anybody that has essentially run out of unemployment plans. To qualify, you must have made at least over $5,000 per year for the last 2 years leading up to 2020. You also must not have been the main decision maker in leaving your last job, meaning if you quit your last job within the last 2 years, you would not qualify for the stimulus bill. Heck of a lot different than America, if you ask me. To receive the money over the long haul, you must continue to meet the income requirements and you must continue to apply every single month. Another thing in Canada is that you cannot collect the stimulus bill and unemployment at the same time. I mean, overall, just kind of looking at this, it seems to me like Canada has their ducks in a row a lot more and is a little bit harder for people to qualify, which in all honesty, probably is a good thing at this point. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and wrap this video up with some of my final thoughts of the stimulus package. Definitely make sure you stay to the end because I do believe that I have a little bit of a different outlook when it comes to kind of the whole stimulus package and everything that is going on in general. Anyone under $130,000 per year in America essentially qualifies for the stimulus package that I'm talking about. And it really makes the question arise that, I mean, are the people that we're talking about even affected by what is going on right now? I mean, I would only imagine that there's quite a few people right now that, you know, they're not doing too shabby. Okay, they're making money online. There's a million things that they're doing, but they're not really that affected. So I don't know, it just makes me wonder. I mean, it makes me wonder, is the stimulus package just kind of a benefit to anybody that maybe didn't have any prior income to all of this? I mean, on some level, it does make me wonder a little bit. Should the stimulus actually be rewarded to people that were making less than $2,000 a month pre-disaster? I mean, again, it does make you wonder. Another thing that I really think about is what happens when people are making more money with the stimulus bill and with unemployment than they were pre-disaster. I mean, if they were only making $1,000 a month before all of this and that was totally on them, then, I mean, I don't know. Maybe they shouldn't be making $2,000 a month or even more after a disaster has pretty much struck America or the world in general. And it really also begs the question, I mean, people making more than $100,000 a year, I mean, do they really deserve to make the extra $2,000 a month? Or should that money maybe be used for somebody that needs it a little bit more? I mean, basically, looking at this from just about any perspective, this stimulus bill has more than just a few holes in it. While there is so much talk about the individual out there, there have been billions and billions of dollars that have gone out to small businesses, but by the look of it, small businesses, I mean, those loans have been exhausted. And in all reality, in my opinion, maybe we should focus a little bit more on the small businesses and we should take our eyes off of the individuals. And I'm not talking about all together. I'm just talking about maybe we should tighten this whole thing up a little bit. If the stimulus were evenly distributed between the individual and the business, in my opinion, it would allow the economy to work a little bit better and to actually continue to thrive even in a time like this. I just believe that essentially stimulus should be equal. It should be equal to the individual, it should be equal to the business, and ultimately we should level the playing fields a little bit and not favor necessarily one party more than the other. But again, that is of course just my opinion. I pretty much never get involved in politics here on this channel, and the likelihood that I ever get involved again is honestly highly unlikely. I just think that giving $2,000 a month to everybody that currently qualifies, being about 225 million Americans, I just think it's a bit outrageous. I essentially do also believe that the stimulus bill should only be provided to people that are directly affected by the illness or the overall economic downturn that has essentially been caused by the disaster that we're talking about here. I mean, people that are unaffected right now, because there are people in the world that are unaffected, should they be getting the money? I mean, should they be getting the free money that we're talking about if they're just working like normal? And I mean, I know some people that are making more money right now than they were before the disaster. I mean, should those people be pulling money out of the fund for the stimulus package, or should those people maybe be reconsidered to not even be qualified to begin with? Well, that's pretty much all I have for you. I really appreciate you staying to the end of the video and listening to all of the opinions I have of the proposed stimulus package, okay? I know that there's a ton of people out there making a ton of different videos on exactly what it is that we talked about here today. I really hope that you liked my perspectives and my kind of fresh ideas that I brought to the table. And if you did, please smash the like button, smash that subscribe button, and let me know what other videos you would like for me to make in the future. I would be happy to make them. As always, my name is Zaback. I appreciate you watching another video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.